I've talked a lot of shit about the Pokemon franchise and fandom on this channel, but one thing I want to make abundantly clear is that I'm a die-hard Pokemon fan. I've got a lot of Pokemon merch and games to show for it too, but my history with the franchise is almost as complicated as the history of the franchise itself. And I thought it was high time I take a look at one of my favourite franchises with more of a critical eye and give my opinion on every main series Pokemon game to date. So of course we're starting with the generation that started it all, Generation 1.
Before I go any further with this review, I'd like to be upfront and say I have zero nostalgia for any of these Gen 1 games, so I'm going in without the rose-tinted glasses a lot of the people watching this review might be going in with. I have no reservations about expressing any thoughts or feelings I have about this game or any other game in the franchise, whether those be good or bad. And that goes double for these games because people always pull punches because they were the first and they laid the foundations, and that's fine and actually kind of commendable to a degree, but I feel like I need to be as real as possible with these reviews, especially since the franchise is so special to me. Also, I won't be looking at Yellow because while it is a slightly better version of these games, it's also more of an anime-esque experience. It's kind of like Ash Grey if it was an official game.
But with that out of the way, let's get to the plot.
We all know this plot like the air we breathe and the ground we walk on, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I plan to do this for every game in the series, so here we go. The game starts out with you, the player, canonically called Red, in your room. You leave your house and attempt to run into the tall grass on Route 1, well, I guess walk, since there's no run button in this game, but you're stopped in your tracks by Professor Oak, who takes you into his lab and gives you and your childhood friend turned rival, Blue, a Pokemon each. After you run an errand for Oak in Viridian City, which lays just north of your home of Pallet Town, he presents you with a Pokedex. After this, you can revisit Viridian City and go west, where you fight Blue, and after you defeat him, you learn about your ultimate goal, which is to become the Pokemon League champion.
It's a pretty great way to open the game. No frills, it just sets the stage for the game going forward and gives you a few goals to work towards. But while we're on the topic of Blue, let's talk about him as a character.
Over the years, I've heard people talk about Blue like he's the biggest arsehole going. I've heard people mention how arrogant he is even in defeat, strutting away like he's hot shit even when you beat him to a pulp, how he's always one step ahead of you, and how he looks down on you in general.
And I just don't get it. I mean, what game have these guys been playing? If you actually read the dialogue, he isn't any worse than that one weird friend you might have who calls you a nerd in a pathetic attempt to get under your skin.
Past the occasional smell you later, he barely has much about him that makes him feel like a dick, minus something we'll get to later. He's actually more helpful and caring now that I think about it. He's always testing you to make sure you're ready for the challenge ahead and giving you advice and pointing you in the right direction. I don't see how he's an arsehole.
I'm guessing the people who claim he's an arsehole are projecting traits of his anime counterpart Gary onto him, more specifically Gen 1 Gary. Which kind of does make sense since Gary is based on Blue, but they're two completely different characters. Hell, even Pokemon Origins Blue isn't that close to the original incarnation of in-game Blue. Blue does say some disparaging and insulting things to you at points in the game, but it didn't really get under my skin. But maybe that's just because I didn't grow up with the game.
Regardless, from Viridian you go north to Pewter City to fight the Rock Gym leader Brock, who is a complete pushover if you picked anything other than this piece of shit. You then make your way through Mount Moon, where you find the main antagonist of this game, Team Rocket. They're kinda like the Mafia if the Mafia only had one intimidating member, and the rest were made up of grade schoolers. After whooping their asses, you get to pick a fossil on the way out and arrive at Cerulean City. Here you fight the Water Trainer Misty, who is basically every Pokemon fan's waifu. Not long after, you find yourself in Vermilion City, where you fight the electric type using War Vet Lieutenant Surge, and then head to Lavender Town via the Rock Tunnel. Since you can't scale Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town without the Silph Scope, you head to Celadon City to challenge the Grass type gym leader and love of my life, Erica. Erica's gym is surprisingly tough because Rap is really OP in this game. Rap, of all moves, anyone who tells you this game isn't broken is lying. Regardless, once you're done with that, you can go to the game corner, which is kinda like a small casino, and you soon discover the place is also Team Rocket's hideout, so you go in there, smack around their boss Giovanni like a pimp, take the Silph Scope and head to Lavender. You then scale the tower, put Marowak to rest, wake up the sleeping Snorlax on the bridge, give the thirsty guard some water and then head to Saffron. And when you arrive, Team Rocket is in your way once again, since you can't take on the gym without clearing out the Silphco building first, which Team Rocket has taken over.
Which is a fucking ball ache because Silphco is a fucking labyrinth in this game. My game glitched and turned itself off at one point, so I had to scale up it twice, and I got lost both times. People complain about Rock Tunnel being hard to navigate, but this puts Rock Tunnel to fucking shame.
Regardless, once you take down an entire criminal enterprise single-handedly and smack around the mob boss for the second time in a row, you're gifted with a Master Ball by the president of the Silph Company. After that, you can take on Koga, the Poison-type gym leader, and Sabrina, the Psychic-type gym leader, in any order you choose, and then you can make your way to Cinnabar Island to take on the Fire-type wielding scientist, Blaine.
Just kidding, you've got to do this completely arbitrary section of the game so you can unlock the door to his gym and fight his bald ass.
I've always seen the Cinnabar Mansion as some completely useless padding, and playing this slog of a game has just strengthened that sentiment for me. The only redeeming factor is that if you explore the mansion, you get some cool details about the lore and larger story of the Kanto region. That aside, once you beat Blaine, it's time for you to backtrack to Viridian to fight the final gym leader, and in what is admittedly a cool twist, the final gym leader is revealed to be the mob boss himself, Giovanni, who upon defeat just gives up and runs off to research Pokemon or some shit.
This twist is weird and completely out of left field, but in a good way. Although, it is overshadowed by another twist that we'll get to in a bit.
Now that you have all like gym badges, you can go tie up any loose ends, and then make your way to the Pokemon League via Victory Road, which was surprisingly easy in this game. And now we're finally at the Pokemon League, where we take on the Elite Four: Lorelei, the Ice-type trainer, Bruno, the Fighting-type user, Agatha, the Master of Ghost types, and Lance, the Dragon Tamer. They're all pretty tough, especially if you're not prepared, but with a decent enough team, you should have no problem.
And here is where we experience one of gaming's most famous plot twists. Someone beat you to becoming champion, and it's none other than your old pal Blue.
I think this is one of the moments that led many to hate Blue over the years. After being a step ahead of you at every turn throughout the game, he managed to do it once again and beat you to the Elite Four, and you want nothing more than to kick his ass. While I still think a lot of people misunderstand Blue's character, at least to a degree, there's no denying that him beating you to becoming champion was plenty motivation to kick his ass one last time. The fight is pretty intense, but with the right team, the battle should be a breeze. And once you beat him, Oak pops up out of nowhere to congratulate you, and you're inducted into the Hall of Fame.
And that's it for the plot. It was pretty simple, but it was a blueprint for every single Pokemon game to follow.
While maybe not the strongest plot in JRPG history, it definitely deserves some level of respect for creating the formula for all future Pokemon games. This game also created the standard in terms of gameplay for all future Pokemon games. Things like the gyms, Elite Four, game-exclusive Pokemon, HMs, Trade and Stone Evolution Pokemon, and many other things were the established norm thanks to these games. And while you can definitely argue that some of these weren't good things, they're all key components to the Pokemon experience we all know and love. But that doesn't mean this game is without faults. Take the region of Kanto for example. If this region wasn't etched into my brain by Game Freak themselves, so I never forget what it looks like, it'd be painfully unmemorable, because of how bland and generic it is. You do have some memorable locales like Nugget Bridge, Celadon City and Lavender Town, but for the most part, I feel indifferent to most of the areas in the game, but even the bland ones are accompanied by some of the most famous songs in gaming history. Every route, town, cave and city is brought to life with this soundtrack, and while it's not my favourite in the franchise, it's an iconic soundtrack for a reason, and its impact on the quality of the game cannot be ignored.
And while I still don't like the region that much, it's still pretty iconic, much like the roster.
You can't talk about a Pokemon game without talking about the roster, and I'm extremely mixed with this one. It's arguably the most famous and most iconic roster in the franchise, but there's a lot more duds here than people are willing to admit. You have Pokemon like Geodude, Seal, Rattata, Dugtrio, Muck, Lickitung and Goldeen, which are all horrible, uninspired designs.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Don't get me started on every 5-year-old's favourite orange lizard.
A lot of Gen 1ers will look at new Pokemon designs and bitch all day long about them being dumb because they're inanimate objects, but they seem to forget that this was a gen where we got Possessed Pokeball and Magnet Pokemon. Granted, those two Pokemon are Pokemon that I like, but damn, being mad at Gen 1, it was the one that set the standard for dumb designs. That being said, for every dumb design, there's a great if not excellent design, with Pokemon like Venusaur, Blastoise, Lapras, Beedrill, Nidoqueen, Nidoking, Ninetales, Poliwrath, Alakazam, Victory Bell, Snorlax, and many others. It's no wonder this game and roster is so fondly remembered. With such a rich roster of both cute and powerful Pokemon, it's hard to not derive even the most minuscule amount of enjoyment from these games. Having such a wide roster really helped sell this game and made it stand out at the time too. This is innovation in a form the JRPG genre had never seen before, flipping many of the conventions of the genre on their heads and breathing new life into them. Instead of having a set party, you had over 100 party members to choose from, all with their own unique strengths and weaknesses, which doesn't sound all too impressive these days, but at the time, this was groundbreaking. And on top of that, these party members grew and evolved alongside you as you progressed through the game, making your bond with them even stronger.
Another thing that made this game a hit at the time was the more subtle ways it told a story. Over the years, I've heard people rave about how cool Team Rocket is and how well crafted the simple main story of Gen 1 is. And I strongly disagree with that.
For example, I don't think Blue is the greatest rival in the series like everyone else, despite being a large part of the story. But I've already touched on that, so let's talk about Team Rocket instead, another large part of the main story. Team Rocket are a bunch of idiots. Other than the fact that they apparently have a death under their belt, there's nothing cool or intimidating about them. They're all a bunch of chumps. Sure, the stuff with Marowak is kinda dark, but for the rest of the game, they're a bunch of bumbling idiots, and they're a chore to deal with. Giovanni doesn't do them any favours either. While he's a pretty intimidating villain at first, even he loses his edge by the end, just giving up and disappearing after you beat him in Viridian. He's a definition of a one-dimensional villain. Well, in this game at least. And apart from that, despite being pretty groundbreaking at the time, the rest of the story is pretty much the standard Pokemon experience. Collect all the badges, become the champion, complete the Pokedex, although I can't really fault it for that since it's the first of its kind.
Sadly, the main bulk of the plot either sucks or is uninteresting, so what subtle storytelling methods am I talking about? Well, let me tell you. Every main series Pokemon game has a theme that is intrinsically woven into the plot, region, Pokemon, and many other aspects, oftentimes so much so that it can go over many players' heads. At times, these themes are attacked directly in a candid manner, and other times it's more subtle and nuanced. And in this case, I think it's a mix of both. And the theme for this game is a mix of science, genetics, and playing God.
We have very low-key and easy to miss examples of these themes being presented, such as Porygon, the man-made computerized Pokemon, and Eevee, the pure normal type, which once given an elemental stone, experiences a genetic makeover and becomes a completely different type. But then we also have all of the more obvious ones, the main one being Mew and Mewtwo. If you take the time to explore and read the text in some of the areas you visit, such as the Cinnabar Mansion, it becomes apparent that Mewtwo, a Pokemon locked away in Cerulean Cave, was basically a genetically engineered clone / killing machine made from the DNA of a rare Pokemon called Mew. And after many deaths and failed experiments, it seems to have been covered up by authorities and scientists as to not alarm the citizens of Kanto.
It's pretty heavy stuff and brings a lot of things into question about this game and future games. While not the strongest example of theming in a Pokemon game, I think it's one of the best trends Gen 1 started. Now I'm sure you guys have one big question. Do these games hold up? No. These games are laughably archaic by today's standards. Hell, even for standards of the time, they weren't all that great.
The way you have to press up to choose the location you want rather than scrolling in all directions, the still hidden awkward dialogue, the fact that half of the base mechanics in the game don't work the way they're supposed to, the fucking bag limit, it's all pretty embarrassing, and the fact that people still swear by these games, despite the fact that some far superior remakes exist, is just baffling. I understand the concept of hardware limitations, as well as limitations in the budget, but when you see things like the poorly made sprites that any beginner pixel artist could have done better, it becomes apparent that some of this stuff was either the product of laziness, or a lack of faith in the product.
Although, even after all of my complaining about this game, it's still charming in places, and much like every other Pokemon game, it's fun. The Pokemon formula established in this very game, no matter how rigid or flawed, always provides for a fun experience for the player. But even still, I don't think I could recommend this game to anyone in good conscience, despite being a fun game, which is a given for any Pokemon game. It was still an extremely flawed and unbalanced experience. Need I mention the psychic types? Is this game completely unplayable? No. but should you seek out a copy or even emulate it? No, because there's literally nothing here to draw you in or give you a reason to play, especially with the advent of the vastly superior remakes. A lot of people will tell you they're worth playing because they were the first, but that's a fallacy. There's more reason to play the first Dragon Quest, the first Zelda, the first Mario, the first Final Fantasy, literally any first in any franchise other than this. If you're adamant about playing them, feel free. You might find something you like in them, but for me, being a lifelong Pokemon fan, I've had my fill of Kanto, especially with Game Freak shoving it down our throats every gen, and I'm sure you guys have too.